All right, so yeah, thank you. I'm from RIAT, which used to be called the Research Institute for Arts and Technology, which is where the RIAT part comes from. But now we're the RIAT Institute for Future Cryptoeconomics, based in Vienna and with a few other places around the world. So I'm just going to start with a short video. Sorry.
Control based on communication implies a negotiation and a kind of contract to be concluded. New forms of brainly attribution seemed to appear on the horizon, and the old gods dressed anew.
So that was a video from our most recent work, which was what we call a crypto theatre piece called Proof of Burn, which we showed last year. It was also broadcast on television, and that film was by Jan Gross. I'll be talking a bit more about that at the end, towards the end, but what I'm going to do is start with talking about a program that some works that we've been doing over the last 5 years, 6, 7 years now, I think, actually, called Experiments in Art and Value. And it's kind of how we ended up to where we are right now with the Institute for Future Cryptoeconomics. So I'm going to start with actually one of my works before we started working as a collaborative RIAT. And this work's called The Old In Out. So in 2011, I was starting work on a PhD that was examining how we can understand the value of the immaterial, specifically how value can be ascribed to knowledge produced by artists. This new economy at the time was described as a knowledge economy, creative economy, post-Fordist economy, cognitive cultural economy. So this is like the economy that we've been working in the last 20 years or so. And like Marx described it as an economy where knowledge becomes the greatest productive force, and one where direct labor and its quantity disappear as a determinant principle of production to become an, of course, indispensable but subordinate moment compared to general scientific labor. And so at this point, general scientific labor, like Marx actually distinguishes both the artistic and scientific development of individuals as this scientific labor. So it's not necessarily only what we consider science these days, but generally sort of research, knowledge production. So what happened in the early 2000s, this sort of new discipline came about called artistic research. It was like very big in the UK, Australia, and Canada. It hasn't really sort of taken off, well, it has a bit now in the United States, and also it came up a bit later in Europe. So artistic research was sort of developed kind of to deal with general sort of market forces in a sense, because art schools were sort of being integrated within universities. And when they were integrated into universities, the sort of general requirements of academics working at universities to produce research was now being applied to artists. And so artists had to describe the work that they produced as artists teaching at art schools as a type of research. So their artworks, their exhibitions was a form of knowledge production. And so a lot of people started discussing, like, what does it mean to create knowledge? How is an artwork considered knowledge? And so, like, yeah, as art was beginning to reconfigure itself as a type of knowledge for asserting its value within this knowledge economy, it was really risked infecting itself by communing with what I call the disease discipline of science that the military-industrial complex has bedded. And so science is a different type of knowledge, and what happened is we had this scientism being introduced into artistic practice. So we kind of started to describe the outputs, the artistic outputs, the knowledge created within artworks within the same sort of realm as scientific knowledge. And then we started having questions about sort of what is truth, because truth is what's knowledge, and how do we value that? So this is a quote from Andre Gortz, which is kind of like what I like to describe what I was looking at in my practice at the time. So only the capacities that exceed any productive functionality, only the culture that serves no purpose, render a society capable of posing questions about the changes going on within it and imprinting a new meaning on them, or a meaning on them. And so what I want to mean by here is there's a distinction between types of knowledge production. We have like applied research, knowledge for the purpose to do something, and basic research, knowledge for no purpose, in a sense, knowledge for the purpose of knowledge. But even the term purpose kind of can't be used there. And so then when we get into this is basic knowledge, knowledge for no purpose, we have the different types of knowledge that we need to unravel, sort of like knowledge for truth and knowledge for meaning. And so this knowledge for meaning is what we're kind of looking at in terms of like artistic research and artistic production. So this is the work I did, the old In-Out. It was a durational performance where I was stamping on sheets of paper in and out for days. I actually sort of was invited to perform this once as a entertainment at the sort of union like the work conference. So all the unions got together and held this big conference on knowledge work, and I was supposed to be the dinner entertainment because the string ensemble is a bit too expensive. And yeah, they had all of the union representatives coming up to me and sort of like saying, "Are you okay? Do you mind stopping?" Like da-da-da, because you know the work goes on for a long time, and I begin to bleed. So, but this was a work that was kind of saying how labor, like applying these sort of terms in and out, this is a form of labor, because when we talk about sort of labor is basically our body changing something, like that's what originally started off as. Then we started to use tools, technologies, and then it's gone a bit further than that. So this is what imprinting meaning on this. And so like it was a bit of an absurd act, but it was also kind of trying to ask like what is the value of artistic production. And this was like a quote from one of the essays, which I really like to quote, that was written about my work. And so one can only surmise that Newman does nothing useful, a toxic asset worthy of liquidation. So this is kind of what we think about how art can be considered in sort of like the knowledge economy, in a sense, beyond just myself. So we could say one can only surmise that art does nothing useful, a toxic asset worthy of liquidation. So yeah, I was doing this work when I was at a conference on sort of artistic research, and I met Matthias Tarasevich, who was working on a project in Vienna called Artistic Technology. And he was kind of dealing with the same sorts of questions, specifically around media art and how value can be ascribed to media art. So like this was in like 2011, and there'd been a lot of discussion on the crisis of new media art, like what is the purpose of new media art after the web hasn't already fulfilled its purpose, and now we're just like fluttering about in these network cultures that kind of exist beyond the media arts. And so like Geert Levink, a media theorist from the Netherlands, wrote like, there was and still is no market for media art, no galleries, few curators and critics, and no audience. And so there is a need for a new distributed form of attention and presentation for art, new media art, new markets for the new economies that are emerging, like the sharing economy, the platform economy, the conceptual economy, all this stuff we hear about all the time, and of course the attention economy. And so we find ourselves in an age of capitalism that fuels itself with the effigies of knowledge, creativity, and individuality, openness, and the social. So these things all kind of burnt to produce knowledge, and they're not actually valued in itself. And this knowledge is an applied type of knowledge. It's just more to do something rather than to know something. And so the artists should be well placed to supply the increasing demand for these resources. They should be, but they often aren't. And once they're extracted from the art world and integrated into the creative industries, the whole artistic component, and I want to sort of like distinguish artistic from creative, is often lost. And so this was like what we were working on is the work, the Bitcoin cloud that came up next, and it was like, how do we create a work of art in a world where art prices go up, and not when the whole of society becomes wealthier, but when income inequality increases. So when there's more income inequality, the higher the value of art. So it's only a time when the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, yada, yada, yada. And this is the time of the knowledge economy. And so we created this work in 2011 called the Bitcoin Cloud. So this was like one of the first works that we kind of produced. At the time, we were called Artistic Bouquet, not Riot. And so the Bitcoin Cloud was sort of all of these computer fans, as you can see. They're like hovering above your head, like a few hundred of them, glowing and reacting to your movement throughout the exhibition space. Your presence, your attendance to this artwork, like generated Bitcoin. So your attention to the artwork accords the artwork real monetary value. So at your feet are several computers. You hear the noise, the fans power on as more people enter the exhibition space. The cloud of computer fans above you begin to spin and to glow more brightly. So the Bitcoin cloud sort of worked by dedicating a certain amount of processing power to the mining rig according to the number of visitors and the intensity of the interaction with the installation. So like the work generated value whenever there were people in the audience. So when there was no one in the gallery, the Bitcoin mining rig was not doing anything. And then where there were more people and then there was more movement, it was dedicated more processing power towards the Bitcoin mining rig. And this was 2011, so it was actually possible to do this. You wouldn't be able to do it anymore. So this was like an idea of how an artwork can generate its own value like through attention. And this was, we started using Bitcoin. At the time, it was just an idea. It was like a tool that we saw, this would be interesting to kind of create value by generating Bitcoin. We didn't sort of really sort of think too far ahead about how this could Bitcoin could completely change the whole economic models of the future. So this is a quote from Wittgenstein, which kind of is nice to put next to the Bitcoin cloud. So yeah, Bitcoin cloud creates new Bitcoins and increases value only if it receives enough attention. These dynamics of attention allow an ambiguous existence. Bitcoin cloud is a part of the art market at the same time as it is setting itself from this market by capitalizing on its own economic attention value. The Bitcoins earned by the attention to Bitcoin cloud were then used in later experiments that we did that I'm talking about now, which includes the blockchain performance. So the blockchain performance was based around these IYY sunflower seeds, which I'll show you a picture of soon. So in 2010, the Tate Modern commissioned IYY to produce sunflower seeds. The work consisted of 100 million double-burned and hand-painted porcelain seeds. In the Chinese city of Jingdezhen, 1,600 people had been working on the project for over 2 years. Visitors at the Tate stole a great number of these small porcelain objects and started to sell them on both Facebook and eBay. The Tate soon decided to not let visitors near the artwork, although they cited health concerns due to the porcelain dust rather than art theft. It was for staying away. So in Sotheby's auction in 2011, 100 kilograms of the sunflower seeds sold for $559,000. And in 2012, the Tate purchased 8 million seeds, 10,000 kilos, and 10% of the total artwork. And so these purchases created a market value for the stolen seeds. So the Tate's purchase of the seeds had originally valued them at £3.50 a piece. 6 years ago, the prices for IYY's sunflower seeds on eBay ranged from 22 cents to $20. However, the authenticity of many of these seeds is questionable because the whole black market emerged in creating fakes of these seeds. So in 2012, we purchased 20 seeds as part of the work Blockchain Performance from Fran Illich, who ran Space Bank. He's a Mexican writer and media artist. So Space Bank had a virtual currency that was backed by hijacked IYY sunflower seeds. And the blockchain performance included transferring 6.8 Bitcoins that we mined through the Bitcoin cloud to purchase the 20 seeds. So the transaction between Artistic Bouquet and Space Bank stays active in the blockchain and is viewable to this day. The 6.8 Bitcoins that we used to purchase the 20 sunflower seeds from Space Bank were valued at the time as $6,000, and they're currently valued at $55,000. So these 6.8 Bitcoins were generated from the attention, so like back to the original artwork, these seeds were generated from the attention that was paid to the Bitcoin cloud. And so if the Bitcoin cloud had dedicated all of its processing power, so not just when people were paying attention to the artwork, but the whole processing power for when it was exhibited within the museums and galleries, we would have generated approximately $3.7 million worth of Bitcoins valued at today's rate. So the value of the artwork remains ambiguous. It could be sort of measured by its attention, its exchange value for the sunflower seeds, its established artworks within the existing art market, or could also be measured by its potential loss of earnings within the Bitcoin market. And so then we moved on to another work called Too Much Money, which we wish we would have had, with the last of our Bitcoins from the Bitcoin cloud. So this was done in cooperation with Society Realist, a French collective, and Georgios Papadopoulos, a Greek economics and arts writer. So this work was kind of, we were looking at sort of how much does money cost? And that's like an interesting question, because it's not how much money is valued, but how much does it cost? And how much does it cost to store money, which is like one way of measuring how the money can be cost something. So the US dollar is required to be kept in Austrian banks. And it's like the most expensive note to keep, and requires a lot of storage space to keep US $1 notes in Austrian real estate. And so we purchased as many US $1 as we could with our remaining Bitcoins from the Bitcoin cloud to create this work, Too Much Money. And so this installation addresses the ambivalent relationship between art and the market, pointing to the problematics of commodification, alienation, and co-optation of creativity. So the work Society Realist, which was produced for the installation, a proposal for a new alphabetic order based on the Esperanto's writing system and pegged on the US dollar rates, is a comment on the ability of the market to create an order of meaning, hinting also at the similarities between market and money. So if we look at sort of how money and markets create meaning, and this is like how we exist today. So the juxtaposition of this work with its object, 4,107 $1 bills, is as suggestive as it's subtle. The relationship between the artwork and the bills is multi-directional. Art creates money, both by representing it, but also by creating value through the actual value of the artwork, but also through the surplus value of art for other economic fields of activity. So conversely, money creates art by providing the very means of artistic production, but also by valorizing the artwork, effectively acknowledging it as art. Money is of critical importance, both for the arts and for society. The only problem being that there's simultaneously not enough and also too much. So that was this work, and while we closed down the work, I was packing up the $1 bills, which we have in like a plastic bag in our studio to this day. You have to wonder sort of, like, money is just a material, just like any other medium. And at any moment we could have cashed out this artwork, but the value remains. It is an art object now, and we keep it to exhibit it, and we hope that the value will increase at some stage, that we could maybe sell the $4,107 for $4,108 at least. So yeah, this is a quote from Georgios Papadopoulos, who was one of the co-authors of the work. So the system of prices organizes an order of meaning where taste, subjectivity, and community are reconfigured according to the mandates and the geopolitics of the art market. So in this hostile environment, the artist needs to create new possibilities of independence. And so this is kind of where we got to next, creating these new possibilities. I'm going to skip over this because I'm getting a bit short of time, but in 2014, we sort of like did a big research project sort of looking at all the different sort of economic models that were being created with altcoins. So at the time, still, this is before Ethereum had really taken off. We were looking at all these like funny little sort of collectives that were just playing around with the source code of Bitcoin and then building other things upon it to create different economic models like Pizza Coin, OneCoin, Fuckcoin. Well, Fuckcoin's a bit more recent, but so here you can see the paper at riat.academia.edu if you want to find it. And so this is sort of like a map of coins, a really cool website where you can look at how all of the different coins evolved. So yeah, the main point was that this whole idea of Bitcoin to kind of get rid of a central authority just doesn't really work in practice. And sort of the whole sort of philosophy and beliefs of the cypherpunks are kind of been proven sort of wrong. This one vote, one computer thing didn't really happen as Nakamoto kind of would have hoped, I imagine, putting thoughts in his or her head. But so we kind of looked at that. This is sort of summarized by Jaya Brecker, who spoke as part of Proof of Burn. Like, a decentralized network does not mean decentralized power. So still value is ascribed by people with capital, people that are able to purchase the mining rigs, or people that control the sort of central markets. This is why we need to move to decentralized markets, to kind of actually get to the process of being able to sort of control value like individually. And so this work kind of comes up to Proof of Burn, which the first video was from. And I'm going to show you a little bit of a video from the film again. But it's in German, so I kind of just give you the gist of it while it's playing. It's from the 80s, and it's a news story about how like computers are going to take over everyone's jobs. Yeah, it's just kind of, it's very absurd. We found this at
Angst vor den
sort of like
seelenlosen
a
Maschinen,
market,
mit denen wir plötzlich leben
like
sollen.
put it into things like
Vielleicht haben Sie
people were
genauso wie
discussing
Herr
about this
Angst,
whole
dass
sort
der
of like future
Computer
of
ihre
AI,
Arbeit und
labor
eines
taking
Tages sogar
over
ihren
real
Arbeitsplatz
labor.
wegnimmt. Und Sie trauen sich eventuell auch noch nicht so ganz zu, mit dem Computer zu arbeiten oder zu verstehen, wie so ein Computer wurde der menschliche Erfindungsgeist immer kühner. Maschinen wurden entworfen.
So basically going through the history of machines.
Produzieren Nahrung. Zeuge, die ihm beim Rechnen helfen sollten, als die 5 Finger
This
der
then
Hand
shows
nicht
one of the
mehr
currencies that we
ausreichten.
created for the artwork now. Yeah. So these are some ceramic shards that we created for the performance of the Crypto Theatre.
And it is able to take its own lack of knowledge into account and to search for the knowledge lacking in other entities which presumably are in better position to bring forth the knowledge sought.
And so this is something that we kind of get back to, like how knowledge is relating to value. So when we look at sort of one of the major problems with crypto markets and generally all sort of economic markets is this idea of information asymmetry. So some people have more knowledge and a better advantage to take a part of these things. And so this is like really something that needs to we need to work through to sort of allow people to take control of their own sort of currency, to actually get into this cipher punk sort of utopia or post-utopia. Sorry, how am I going for time? It's like, so I'm a bit confused. Anyway, so yeah, everyone hopefully knows a bit about proof of work. So we've discussed it. We've discussed blockchain yesterday, and so this is like consensus algorithm. So like, how do we get the computer networks to agree that something is true? And so the consensus algorithm that Bitcoin used as one of the first consensus algorithms of blockchain was proof of work. So if statements are like assigned a truth value only if they can be given a constructive proof, and proof of work was what was done with the Bitcoin. So, but then if you think about sort of when I was talking about like truth versus meaning and different types of knowledge production, if we look at sort of like multifaceted logic, such as fuzzy logic, how can we allow for more than 2 truth values? And sort of, especially, you know, in this era of post-truth and what we could also say post-consensus, maybe we've got this place of post-value as well. And so this is like a Bitcoin mining town. And this is kind of what we were looking at, is when the computers are doing all the work, like what is the role? So the computers solve the problems, then they get ascribed the value through the Bitcoin, through the mining rig. And then what happens to the people? So this was like a kind of little experiment that we did called Proof of Present. which is like dealing with like what money is, what currency is, which is essentially a promise, a belief system, and like how people can create their own sort of markets just by being. And so this was the installation. We created a system based on the NEM tokens, which is a proof of authority. But what we did was, you might have seen how it works outside. But basically, people sort of like log into the what we called the shrine, touched it, and the longer they're there, as they're there, being present there, they start to earn the tokens. The more people that come there, the less tokens an individual earns, and the longer they stay there, the less they are able to earn as well. So the best thing to do, if you knew what was going on, like again with the information asymmetry, is to come in first, be there alone, and then you'll earn the most possible capital and like leave before the others get there. And so this is kind of like how markets work now as well. And then what we have is what we did during the performance was we split the audience up into two groups. So some people knew how the tokens worked, how the algorithm worked, and so they had an advantage versus the people that kind of didn't really know what was going on and just like stood there for ages trying to earn as much currency as possible. So this was at a festival called Future of Demonstration, and you could use the tokens, which we called dark presence, which was a decentralized autonomous research cluster, which was the name of our group at the time, again. To earn the tokens, and you could buy drinks with it, you could get to the after party with it, and these ceramic shards that I showed earlier you could exchange for, which had even more value. Actually, you need the shards to get to the big party at the end also. But like, yeah, so there were people that came in and knew how the system worked and were able to completely manipulate all the other audience that had already been there. They were able to access the shrine earlier, so they kind of thought that they would have had the capacity to earn more, but because they didn't know how the system worked, they're actually earning less. And the other people came in and were able to sort of get the tokens and exchange and get lots more beers and get to the party, and some people had to go home without having a drink. So, and also we had, like, I was there running a black market as well, which like totally screwing people over. So they would have, they had these RFID readers, which were their wallets on their fingers. And so I would like sell them various things. And they would say it's like 30 dark presence tokens, I would tell them, and then they'd like put their wallet down, and I'd charge them 300 and then give it back, and then they'd have no cash left for their drinks as well. So, I mean, this is just kind of like working, and you got to know what you're doing. And like, so this is like a bit of the video of the performance. I mean, there's no sound for this. Yeah, so this is them, the second group coming in to the space, they're having the knowledge that these shards, which are on trees, are worth more. So these things here. So they're collecting all of these. So these were worth about, like, if you had been standing at the shrine for like 3 hours. And these were just in the space the whole time, whereas the first group didn't even think to take them or know that they could take them because they were art installations. And yeah, so people were then standing there. We thought because there was like, there was about 150 people there, and you could maybe only fit like 10 people around the shrine, that there'd be some sort of like fight happening to try and get there, but everyone was very polite. Also, we kind of said that there were enough of these shards, the ceramic leaves on the tree, for 2 each. But we didn't say you had to have 2 each, but everyone, of course, was like it's Austria, so it's a social democratic country, so they kind of made sure that they only took 2 each. So yeah, this was like what we called like an experimental, like a cryptoeconomic game that we did just to play out what was happening. And it involved a lot of people, and so I would just like to say thank you to all of the participants. It includes Max from Terra Zero, who spoke yesterday. And this is something that I also want to discuss quite a bit. Like both Max and Ruth touched on it yesterday, which is this way of like what Ruth called DWO, do it with others. This cooperative working sort of situation, which is something that we really sort of like believe in like co-production, like distributed sort of production as well. So we never work with just this one authorship thing of a typical studio model. So yeah, this is like from Matthias Tarasevich that kind of describes a bit of the philosophy behind RIAT, which is production in the 21st century works with distributed authorship and identities. Artists present them processes coded in the fragmentations of global networks. Contemporary post-artistic output is developed out of collective inquiries. Research processes are results of distributed agency between humans, machines, and programs. There is nothing more than to leave traces and not to produce final products, but process artifacts. So this is how we describe most of our practice. Like, we don't produce artworks, we produce these leftovers from the various actions that we perform. And so I also kind of wanted to describe like how we moved from this idea of the Research Institute for Art and Technology to an Institute for Future Cryptoeconomics. And this is kind of when we're talking about sort of these experiments I was showing, that experiments in art and value, you got to realize that technology is like not just sort of like a gadget. It's a tool, it's a strategy, it's a method of doing things. So if you want to like hack a technology, if you want to work with artistic technology, you need to look beyond just sort of like the you know, Arduinos and things like that, because technologies are also institutions, technologies are economies, technologies are sort of laws and contracts, and all of these types of technologies we work with now. And we believe that the cryptoeconomics is a way to work to kind of like really sort of hack and make and be artistic with these types of technologies. So this is kind of like how we describe cryptoeconomics. I will read it also. So cryptoeconomics works with projections of future events, often dubbed reverse game theory. Cryptoeconomics creates a test bed for predicted outcomes of incentives and penalties in close relation to real-world economics. But as cryptoeconomics are only one aspect of summoning the future, on the example of mechanism design, for instance, other tools and methods of inquiry exist which can be considered. To research future cryptoeconomics, we utilize just interdisciplinary research, or more specifically what we call speculative devices, which is like, yeah, speculative fictions in a sense, and artistic technologies. And so again, like I was going to draw attention to the do it with others part, which is basically how we work. This is us. We work in this very open workshop model, invite a lot of people to work with. As you saw, a lot of our previous works were all cooperations. And then I kind of want to end with a quote from the end of a talk yesterday from Max Hampshire with the flower tokens, because I really loved what he said. It kind of defines what I wanted to sort of emphasize about working together on these speculative futures, and why you need to work with multiple people. So maybe I should get Max to stand up here and quote it. But so a constructive approach is very much dependent on the different narratives of the future you see as potential, and how potential they are relies on your knowledge of scenarios related to them. Each of these constitute aspects of the approach. The narratives you depend on, which themselves stem from the scenarios you relate to them, will change via the process of iteratively creating micro-environments and experiments. And obviously, the more people you have involved in these processes also brings more narratives and more perspectives. So, yeah, hopefully that's kind of given a bit of idea of how knowledge, art, technology, value, currency, crypto, kind of can sort of work together and be almost the same thing. So yeah, I would like to thank Open Austria for bringing me here. I'm Australian, but I live in Austria, so don't get too confused. And yeah, so sign up to our newsletter, riat.news you can, or visit our website, riat.at. And yeah, contact me on Twitter or email. So thank you.